thank you all for coming this evening, and we'll just continue to have folks come into the session as they pop in here. Helping us this evening are Kate Barnes of our admission office and Maddie Willenberg, and I'm thrilled that they can help us and deal with some tech issues. Throughout this session, if you have questions, please put them in the chat and we will try and get to as many of them as possible. My name is Moira Kelly and I am the president of Explo, and I am thrilled that we're here this evening with Amy Christie, who is an educational consultant with Macmillan Education. And Explo has been working with Macmillan Education for quite some time, and we like working with Macmillan because they really share our views on helping students thrive and really helping students find colleges that are a good match for them. And we share a philosophy around what it means to thrive, and that name brand colleges can be a good thing for some, but not for all. And since we all know, or at least some of us know, that college applications, particularly the whole college process in the last few years, particularly because of COVID, has changed pretty significantly. We wanted to bring Amy in to talk about what she's seen happening, what you can control and what you can't control, and what you really need to be focusing on to make the college planning process, the process itself, a better one, and then what happens on the other end of that process. So with that, Amy, I'm going to give a little bit of your background and you can say some more once I give a little bit of it. Amy, before she was at Macmillan, was the director of college counseling at Dexter Southfield School, prominent school in the Boston area, and also Chapel Hill Chauncey Hall School. She was also the director of, or at least the college counseling person in London at the American School in England. And in addition to that, she has taught English at a variety of places, including Stratford Academy and Culver Academies. So she has been in the education world for a very long time, and is very up to date on what is going on. And so with that, Amy, I'm going to pass it on to you because this really is your show, although I might intervene at points here and there to ask you questions and help clarify some things from questions that pop up from families.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for inviting me tonight. And I echo what Moira says. We are kind of talking the same talk and walking the same walk. And so it's fun to get together and unite to talk to you about how we feel we can best support students at this time in their lives. So I just have a few slides. I want to leave plenty of time for Q&A as well. So let me advance here. Okay. So Moira told you a little bit about who I am. Former English teacher, former independent school college counselor. I've been working with teens for over 25 years, ever since I graduated from college. My husband is a high school English teacher, so our children get no breaks. We are a fully kind of grammar nerd family, and a mother of three. By next year, it'll be 3 teenagers. And so I'm bracing myself for that. My oldest is a junior in high school. And so after working with other people's students for many, many years, I get to experience this with my own child, which I already can tell will be very different. And we have a lab, of course, because we don't have enough going on. My students who I work with are usually grades 9 through 12. A lot of local students in the Boston area, but I also work with international students, particularly students from the UK, because I spent some time there. I also work with graduate students and transfer applicants. But Macmillan as a whole is a large group of 20-ish consultants, and we all have different specialties. Some people work with younger students. I've provided them there a lot of different areas of expertise in our group. We're all either former educators or admissions officers. And in the past few years, we have created our own method of school and college planning, called the WISE method. And so for the college end of things, we like to think of it as wonder, investigate, seek, and then endeavor. And we really feel that in order to have a thorough and rewarding and fulfilling college process, students need to move through each of these phases. And that is how we produce what we hope are student-centered results, not necessarily name brand or prestige-centered results. Our focus is on the student first. So there's our happy crew on a blustery day in front of TD Garden. I don't know if you can see my arrow moving on the webinar. This is Don McMillan and his wife, Sarah McMillan. They are our owners. TD Garden is one of Don's favorite places in the world. And this little Venn diagram shows that what we're aiming to do is combine our knowledge of schools and colleges, our knowledge of admissions, and our knowledge of student development to help students find student-centered results by the end of their college application process. Now, as Moira said before, she and I are focused on helping students find where they will thrive. And thriving doesn't necessarily mean coasting or going somewhere super easy. And it doesn't mean going somewhere where you can't learn effectively. So part of this exploration is figuring out what thrive means for you and what kinds of places will help you thrive. There's a phenomenal podcast by Malcolm Gladwell where he actually digs into rankings in the US and how they came about and how they are produced and all of the flaws in that system. And so I highly recommend you find that and listen to it. As Moira said, what a college that is best for one person is not necessarily best for another person. So that alone kind of calls out rankings. It's not just kind of an idealistic opinion, but it's actually a fact based on research that what matters more in your own success, however you define it, or the years that happen after graduation, what matters more is how well a student does, not just the name on the diploma, but how well a student does. And so that is key. Another great resource for you that our whole team read recently that I put on my Facebook page and I keep sharing with everybody is Never Enough by Jennifer Wallace. Loads of just really helpful information to help parents who are guiding their students through the high school years, especially if you may be in a place or a community that seems maybe overly focused on achievement and competition. That could be a great resource. Okay, a lot of students think that they need to figure out exactly what they want to study before seeking the colleges or before building a list. And if students do already have a really strong feeling, a really strong inclination, that's terrific. But students don't have to. And in the United States, out of all the different universities in the world, we have the most flexibility available to us, that students really can spend the first couple of years of college testing out different subjects, taking different classes. A lot of times the best classes are just with certain professors, regardless of what department it's in or what subject it is. So we really want to encourage students to follow their interests, even when they're filling out applications and it says, do you know what you want to major in? You can say, no, I don't know yet. That's totally fine. It might be helpful to know that usually the liberal arts colleges within a large research university might be a little less selective than the specialized colleges like engineering and business and nursing. You may notice that I try to avoid any kind of absolute statements in this presentation. There is very little in this whole process that is completely black or white, and that alone can be stressful and frustrating for families sometimes. So you may hear me saying usually or often. There are always exceptions. In keeping with thinking about your major, you don't need to choose a career when you're 17. It was several years ago that we started saying to students, hey, we don't even know what the careers of the future are going to be because technology is moving and progressing and changing so quickly. And so I think we can still say that if you follow your strengths and your interests and you focus on building skills, you will find multiple arenas to use those skills where you are needed. I can't say strongly enough, and this is another point that Wallace discusses in her book, Never Enough. We need more than just STEM majors. If we only have STEM majors, there will be no movies to go see. There will be no books to read. There will be no music to listen to on the radio. We'll have lots of structures and we will have systems, but we won't have the humanity that those are there for. So I had to throw in one of my favorite quotes from one of my favorite movies here. Like a lot of English teachers in the 90s, Robin Williams was my first inspiration, so I had to throw that out there. And for students who are thinking, what if I don't know what I like? What if I don't know what I'm good at? That's totally fine too. And that's totally normal at your age. And that's why programs like Explo can be really awesome opportunities to go test out. People didn't have programs like these, 20, 30 years ago. You really just kind of had to take a stab in the dark or wait until you got to college to start exploring. Explo lets you kind of test out some different ideas in the summer. And it's also kind of a low risk opportunity. We are definitely seeing students who are afraid of taking risks or afraid of failure. That's a lot of psychologists have been tracking that. Explo is just freedom to learn and explore. Okay. So a lot of people, I get a lot of questions from families. How many should I apply to? This slide may be pretty overwhelming. I'm not going to dwell on it too long. Suffice it to say that I'm just barely old enough that when I began this career, the advice was like, well, a few reaches, a few targets, a few likelies. Now, if students are looking at fairly selective colleges and universities, now we have the whole world of early decision, regular decision, which really starts to divide the list into two rounds, an early round and then a later round. So of course, maybe if you're riskier in the early round, you want to be more conservative in your approach in the second round. So this is just a way of even just visually helping you see that what once may have been fairly simple now is more of kind of a phase 1, phase 2 process for some students. And this may also be a good point for me to tell you what I tell a lot of families is, if this feels crazy, you don't have to do it this way. Or if you see people around you who you think are maybe spending too many resources and too much of their time and kind of approaching this whole process in a way that doesn't work for your family values and your priorities, you can support your child in the way that works best for you and your child. So this is just an example of what some students may be doing. Okay, Another big question coming out of COVID, it was on the rise certainly before COVID, and then COVID really accelerated the move into test optional. If you look at the average test scores now in this post-COVID, mostly test optional world, the average scores are very high because the only people submitting them are the people who got really high scores. This increases stress. It unfortunately makes students think, oh my gosh, I have to get that score to be admissible at that institution. Not necessarily so. There are a few institutions who either returned to requiring testing after COVID, like MIT, or who never really went test optional, even during COVID. I think Georgetown, if they did go test optional, it was for as small of a time period as possible. And I believe the service academies still want to see some testing. There are a few institutions who are called test blind or test free. And it's the whole University of California public system, our local WPI here, Worcester Polytech. And what that means is they're saying, don't even send us the scores. We don't even care what you got. Even if you got a perfect score, we're not looking at them. Which was really kind of radical when that came about. And there are lots of different reasons for institutions to do that. And I would say, in the test optional world, it just helps emphasize that the transcript and your subjective components are still important. So therefore, a lot of students may take the test and come out with a score that may feel a little borderline. Okay, I'm looking at the averages. It's hard to know if I should submit or not. I pulled this data to help you see that I do occasionally have some parents who just think that you're just doomed if you don't submit scores. So I wanted to show you this. This is from last year's data. So of the people enrolled at BU, of the enrolled freshmen, 23% submitted their SATs, 12% submitted ACT. At UMass, 30% of enrolled freshmen submitted an SAT and 5% ACT. And at Harvard, 50, I deliberately chose 3 different, very popular Massachusetts institutions. 55% submitted SAT, 28% submitted the ACT. So what that tells me, and the only reason the ACT percentages are lower is, I believe, just because historically the SAT has been more popular on the coasts and the ACT has been more popular in the center of the country. I wouldn't read anything else into it beyond that. So what I would deduce from this is, does submitting test scores help? Yes. Is it absolutely essential? Are you doomed if you don't? No. So you just do the best you can and then move on with your life. It should not take up an inordinate amount of time and energy and resources. So parents and students may see articles every year, particularly in the spring, about like, oh, sometimes even families, in the car line or the Whole Foods line or on the sidelines of the soccer field, sometimes families are even saying, oh, did you hear? Nobody got in anywhere. That's an exaggeration. Yes, acceptance rates seem to get lower and lower with each passing year at certain colleges. It's really just because the numbers of applications are increasing each year. So mathematically, that's going to happen. Are the apps increasing at all colleges? Not necessarily. For some bizarre reason, right? People, it's the colleges with the lowest acceptance rates whose apps are going up. It's almost as if the odds get harder and harder and more people. It's like the lottery or something, like the Mega Millions. So Part of the reason for the low acceptance rates is that application numbers are going up more and more. The more apps a college receives, the harder it is for them to predict their numbers and to hit their necessary numbers in terms of accepting the right number of students in order to yield the correct number of students. And the more, the harder it is for them to predict, then the more wait lists they have to use because they just don't know what to do. And then, of course, that increases the stress sometimes for the students and families. So we're trapped in a bit of a cycle here on both sides. In terms of selective college admissions, too many students are applying to the same 20 colleges. And I say it to my students all the time. And there are thousands of students out there who are admissible to highly selective colleges. Can they do the work? Are they intellectually capable of doing the work there? Of course they are. Are there enough beds for everyone applying? No. So, you know, we have to broaden our perspective and look at more colleges. In my opinion, and I think we were talking and Moira agreed, I am seeing students focusing too much on the wrong elements of a college, focusing on prestige and glamour and popularity of a college. This is why I have this ridiculous lazy river photo here. There are lots of universities in the States that are really putting money into making their campuses more and more elaborate, like a resort to attract students rather than focusing on the academics or the faculty or the special programs. And I think students are really dazzled by that. Social media has not helped. I've started talking to my colleagues within the past few years about how social media and the TikToks that students are producing are giving prospective students a really unrealistic understanding of what college life is like. And it might not be that fun and perfect all day, every day. And it can be a rude awakening sometimes, you know, halfway through freshman year when everyone's studying and you can't find anyone to go have fun with, and the sky is gray. That's life. That's college. Another important concept to understand is enrollment management, which is not just admissions. It's not just we will read applications and take the people who we like. It means that colleges have internal institutional goals and needs and projects, and they will admit people based on how they need to fulfill those goals. So it's important for students and families to remember that colleges are businesses, or they operate like businesses sometimes, and they have to kind of take care of their own livelihood. And sometimes that is why they're choosing certain students. It's not personal. I've even gotten to the point in recent years where I've literally had to say to some of my students, since you don't have full control over everything in this process, you cannot associate your self-worth with the name of the college you go to. This is not about you. This is partially about them and what they are doing. So people can start to feel kind of hopeless sometimes in the face of these, you know, lowered acceptance rates and increased applications and the increased competition. So what do? It's important to know, and this is a fact, most colleges accept most of their applicants. So that statement, oh my gosh, nobody's getting in anywhere, is not true. There are so many amazing colleges out there with amazing professors who love teaching undergraduate students, and the people who know how to find these colleges are your school and some independent counselors like me. And it's kind of funny when we work with families and we suggest some colleges that they research and they say, I've never heard of that. Yeah, that's why it's my job. It's my job to hear of these and go check it out. I had a Boston family go out and visit University of Denver a few years ago, and they hadn't really heard much about it, and they came back and said, that was terrific. Why is no one talking about it? And I said, you tell me. So we're trying to kind of build those bridges. And I think the other way to approach this that is helpful is to focus on what really matters. What are the academic programs they're offering? Do they look appealing to you? Who are the students going there? Who are the professors? And is there an opportunity for the students' personal growth? That matters more than how many Starbucks they have on campus, or, is it close to a fun party area? That matters a lot more. Okay, so I talked about what you can control and what you can't control. You cannot control the enrollment management goals of the college, but there is a lot that you can. The transcript, which means both the classes the student is taking and how well they are doing in those classes. The writing that is produced in the application. This is the main piece that students have entire control over. And sometimes that can be scary for people who are a little uncomfortable with writing. And sometimes that can be scary for parents who are worried that their students aren't going to write something that's impressive enough. But the writing is really where you meet the human being behind the numbers. A GPA and test scores can only tell you so much. The writing is where you hear what the student cares about. You get to know what's in their heart. I get really cringy and cheesy working with my students and talking about writing, but that's where they want to know, who are we welcoming into our community? Who am I putting in a room as a roommate with another student? Who's going to be joining the class discussions? This is where they're looking for good people. I was at a big conference once within the past couple of years, fairly recently, and literally I heard an admissions rep say, we want the people who are going to pick up your pencil for you and give it to you when you drop it. I mean, they're literally looking for just common decency and compassion and just being considerate. So just these nice human qualities. The writing is where students are able to show who they are. And then the activities. So I also have kind of a new way that I've started looking at these extracurricular activities the past few years. It's not meant to be an arms race of who can do the most things, who can kind of brag about how little sleep they got or how busy they are. I now look at it more as, okay, you are required to go to school between the hours of whatever, right? 8 and 3 or something like that. And you have to do your homework. Aside from that, everything else is your choice. What are you choosing to do with all of those other hours? And it kind of doesn't matter what you choose, just do something. And I think sometimes kids are almost too paralyzed by, like, well, what should I do? What do colleges want to see me do? Man, do anything other than nothing, right? Perfect your juggling skills, or start your own after school babysitting club for the kids on your cul-de-sac, or whatever, if it's a structured club at school or a structured sport or theater or something, great. If your school doesn't offer something that you want to do, look for it outside of the walls of your school, in your community. So it's not so much what you're doing, it's, do you have the motivation and the oomph to go find what you want and go create it. So anything and everything is great. I put no check boxes because I think that along the way, and there have been different kind of popular buzzwords over the past many years. Service became, a really big thing. I think actually as a country, we're starting to embrace the idea of service just as an essential kind of worthwhile part of being a human being and a worthwhile citizen. But for a while there, I think families were seeing it as a checkbox. Okay, I did a sport. Okay, I play the clarinet. Okay. And I used to have parents say, like, he's only done 30 hours of service. Is that enough? The admissions reps they're not tallying. They're not going to say, ooh, he should have squeaked out 5 more. It's, what do you want to do? And are you doing something meaningful? In addition to the activities, your interaction when it's possible, the student's interaction with the admissions office sometimes is helpful. And then I'm a really big believer in staying healthy. As we all know, we're worried about the mental health of our young people, and too many students are sacrificing their sleep, their nutrition, even just fun bonding time with friends and family for homework and test prep. When I talk to my students, I always say, what's going on this weekend? What's fun happening in your life? Is there a homecoming dance? Are you going out to the movies with your friends? I mean, now with, in our day, it was go out to the movies. That was the most fun. But they need to sleep. Sometimes I'll have a student say, I'll meet with you during my lunch block. I'll just skip lunch. And I'll go, no, 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 no. You have to eat lunch. I'm not letting you skip the food. So just taking care of these basic needs is really important. Okay. I think that for many years, families and that really it's students and parents have been trying to figure out how to game the system. How do we find the magic key? How do we find the secret passageway into X university? When I was in high school, I think it was really just padding the activities resume. I remember at one point, I don't even know when it was in high school, I joined the art club. What did we do? I remember making a gingerbread house maybe once. I don't remember anything else happening, but I slapped it on my application. That was stupid. I just thought I had to accrue lots of stuff. For a while, pointy apps was the big buzzword. You're supposed to be pointy. You're supposed to know exactly what you're going to do, and everything you do has to be pointed in that direction. Before that, it was well-rounded. That was another thing that I think was from my generation. Well-rounded. You need to do a little of this, a little of that, a little of that, a little of that. Should someone who hates sports force herself to do sports just because she's supposed to be well-rounded? Not necessarily. Another kind of myth is like quantity over quality. And I have a very specific reference for this. This year, just within the past couple of months, a couple of colleges, and I believe that Lafayette College in Pennsylvania was the first one I heard say this. A couple of colleges now have told the current seniors, hey, just so you know, there are 10 activity slots on the common application. We're not going to read past number 6. And they don't mean that to shortchange you. They don't mean we don't have time to give you a good read. They mean we don't want you stressing out doing more than you can handle And we don't want you to feel like you just have to add a bunch of stuff just to get 10 activities there. So I think they're really trying to help students focus on what's really important to them, quality over quantity. So I'm saying those old buzzwords are out. What's in my opinion, and in the philosophy of Macmillan, and in what we tell our families, you do you, and you do it to the max that you can, that's appropriate for you. So I still have students sometimes saying, well, what do colleges want? What do they want me to say? What do they want me to do? They want you to do what you want to do. That's actually what they want. They want you to do the important self-investigation that is an inherent part of adolescence and an inherent part of this developmental time for the adolescent brain, and take it at your own pace, and you will discover your gifts eventually, especially when you do the process in a way that's in keeping with your priorities and values. So I think that, yes, I think that is my last slide. And I can stop sharing now.
Okay. Well, Amy, that was a lot.
I said I would go through them quickly, and I tried to.
Right. Yeah. Well, we do have some questions, and we do have
Right.
one family unfortunately has to leave promptly within the next
Okay.
5 minutes. I want to get to their question first. And actually, they have two. One is your thoughts on the cultural a worry of the ACT and the SAT being culturally insensitive, and perhaps not that sensitive to for neurodiverse students. And you have any thoughts on that?
I would say, true. No doubt about it. My frame of reference, just from what it reminds me of, is when I was working in England many years ago, and we had a lot of American expats, but a lot of other also international students who would take the SAT or ACT at our school to apply to the US. And my friend, the other college counselor, pointed out to me how US centric the testing is, because it would ask questions about quarters and dimes and nickels. And that was really excluding a large population of test takers who the colleges would like to welcome to their campus. So I would say that College Board and ACT will need to reckon with that sooner rather than later. I don't know if it's a priority for colleges. I don't know that I hear a lot of buzz about that. The Supreme Court has kind of jumped in and created, additional issues for them in terms of trying to build diversity and access on their campuses. And so they're fighting the fight in that way as best they can. But you are correct, and luckily it's optional, I would say, for neurodiverse students. And I would also say that a lot of the neurodiverse students I've worked with actually do a beautiful job in some of their writing, in telling their story and telling about their educational journeys. And I think that can speak volumes for their potential in college and their abilities.
That's great. Amy, can you pop back up the slide deck? And
Yes.
and it's the slide that you and I actually talked about
Great.
prior to the webinar starting, the one on target schools, and the one I
Yes.
mean, right?
Yes.
And can we just spend just a couple minutes on that?
Yes.
Because I do think this has shifted, right? So on the left side, you've got, it was pretty clear. You do your
Right.
2 or 3 reaches and your targets and your likelies, and you were all set and ready to roll.
Right.
And now with early action, early admission, second level early action. I mean, there's just
Right.
layers of this. So can we just start off when you talk about round one,
Mm-hmm.
and you're talking somewhere around November 1st for most
Mm-hmm.
schools.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about early admission likelies, meaning,
Yes.
can you just, so early admission likely is a school that you're really, really interested in that school,
Mm-hmm.
and you would be thrilled to go to school there, and it is highly likely, given your background and your profile, that you would be admitted there. Is that,
Sure. Yeah,
yeah?
I'm happy to kind of walk through this and
Yeah.
explain how I'm using these
That
terms
would
and
be
even the color coding. So just to clarify, and can you see when I'm moving my little arrow around? I
Oh,
don't know.
sorry. I did early action versus early decision. Yep, yep, yep,
Yes.
yep.
So just to help the viewers, so early decision, which we call ED sometimes, is the binding agreement.
Yep.
That's the one, if you really love it and you would choose it over all others, you can apply early decision. You actually, the student and the parents and the school counselor actually sign an agreement, all three of them, saying the student will attend if accepted. Early decision is the one that kind of increases your chances. At most, not at every single college. It definitely doesn't hurt your chances. But at many colleges, it does help your chances a little bit. The reason why is because you're making that binding agreement. The colleges know they are going to yield you. So it helps with those spring problems of how many students do we accept in order to hit our numbers accurately. Also, when colleges can brag about a high yield, they go up in the rankings. So
Mhm.
part of this is the competition between colleges. The irony, now, okay, before I say that, ED tends to be offered at highly selective universities. So this is the other caveat. Not every college offers every deadline option. They're all totally different. So it becomes this kind of puzzle of strategy that we help students iron out. So sometimes there is a highly selective college or university that a student wants to apply to early decision and make that binding agreement. It doesn't have to be a reach. Oops, sorry, I pushed the button. It doesn't have to be a reach. Someone may fall in love with a school that offers early decision, and maybe it's actually a target for them and their data points, or maybe it's even a likely. That's awesome. We love it when people fall in love with their likelies. It's like the kids really know themselves sometimes, and they know where they'll be comfortable and where they'll fit in kind of and find their people. But this is, so remember, this is an example of what someone might do. They might apply early decision to a reach. I say be careful with far reach, which is almost like a school. I would call any college with an acceptance rate below 10% a far reach or a reach for anybody, because it's impossible to predict. It's impossible to predict. So if we have a student, and if a qualified counselor or college counselor has said, I think you need to think of this college as a far reach, it kind of means even the boost of ED is probably not going to yield an acceptance. The other, oh, sorry, I keep doing that. Okay. On the other hand, many colleges offer early action. Early action is when you apply early and you get a decision a little bit early, but you don't have to go. So since there's no promise of yielding you and the college kind of isn't getting anything out of it, it works best if you're a strong candidate. So sometimes, and tell me to just say cut, Amy, if I'm getting too much in the weeds. Sometimes students will do some early action likelies to get a yes back early because that helps with stress levels.
Yeah.
Sometimes students will do a rolling universities tend to be not super selective. So you hear back quickly, you get a yes, and sometimes it's the most talented, it's kind of the strongest applicants who are the most worried that they're not going to get in anywhere. So, okay, so let's throw something really likely on there. So, I put the University of California system here just because they're due November 30th. They're kind of in this early batch. So these are the types of schools a student might put on kind of a round one of things due before November 1-ish. So students hear back from their early decision by mid-December. If they are denied or deferred, then they will probably want to launch these other applications that they have ready to go. Now there's a thing called early decision 2, which is just, okay, if my first early decision choice didn't work out, here's another stab at early decision. Maybe the first person you proposed to said no. Well, who's the second person you love second best? So you go with ED2. So it doesn't have to be a target. It's wise if it's something a little less selective than this one, because if this one was a denial, then this one very well may be, if that's also a reach. So sometimes students kind of try out what happens here, and then they have another college that they really, really, really like that might be slightly less selective, and sometimes they just want to lock it in there. If a student is applying in round 2, having enough likely, RD stands for regular decision, which is the January 1 phase. Having likelies in this batch is essential. If a student is only applying to targets and reaches, they may come out with a lot of wait lists. And the way I would define target is a student has 50-50%, 50-50 chance of acceptance or denial. I think a lot of families hear the word target, or possible is another word that some systems use. I think some families hear that and they think it's likely to happen. No, that's a likely. So sometimes if we almost translate this to, you're in Vegas and your chances are 50-50, how much money are you really going to bet on that on that game? And so a lot of this is just about colleges not knowing how to handle all of these applications that they're being flooded with.
So there actually is a strategy to doing this a
For
bit.
sure.
Yeah. Which
Yeah.
we can't really dig in. And it strikes me that a lot of this is very dependent upon a student's background, what they're
Yes.
interested in. I mean,
Yes.
geographically, where they're willing to go. So answering
Yes.
this, the strategy is going to be somewhat different for
Yes.
every single student. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well,
And students can do this. They can do this one if they want. If
Yeah.
they're thinking, I'm not comfortable making a commitment anywhere, fine. We'll do it this way, right? But for people who are really aiming at highly selective institutions, this is kind of the gauntlet
Yeah.
that they end up running.
So Amy, I'm going to ask you another question. So another family had a question. So a student is attending a really top-notch high school, but their grades are, let us say, mediocre. And so should they really be digging in and working on trying to get a good ACT or SAT score? Does that become ever more important for them?
I mean, certainly I would say, I'm not gonna lie, certainly if all the other parts of the application are really strong,
Mhm.
then the testing becomes less important.
Yeah.
And that's for sure. I thought your question was going to be, and I'm happy to throw this out there. Sometimes parents are worried, how do colleges know that this high school is actually really hard, that and quite rigorous and competitive that my child is going to, as opposed to like the high school that my niece and nephew go to in another state or something. And colleges do know that partly through the academic profile that high schools put together every year with data, history, percentage of students who go to college. Some high schools have the whole matriculation list on there so that colleges can see who their student body is and what their curriculum is. And so that's one way that colleges differentiate between different high schools. But in terms of I mean, I would say sometimes it's different for every student, right? I would say that maybe if the student feels that their transcript does not accurately reflect their intellectual capabilities, their academic capabilities, and if
Mhm.
they think that they might be able to show that better on a standardized test, then yeah, do some prep and do the best you can. We like to say if you're going all in on standardized testing, do some prep, take it maybe maximum 2 or 3 times. You really hit a wall eventually. I've seen students in the past take it like 7, 8 times. Maybe someone got a 780 on the math and they keep taking it over and over again, trying to get the 800. That's ridiculous. And at that point, go do something more interesting with your time. That will be much more interesting to the readers as well. So I would say, if you think your grades aren't as great as they could have been, um, with what you are capable of, maybe do some work on the testing and see if that helps. But again, it's don't drive it into the ground to the point that it's taking away from other important parts of your life.
I'm going to pop through some other questions quickly because we don't have much time. Geographic diversity. So, does it make a difference that I live, for example, on the East Coast? Is there something to be said for applying to schools in the South or the West, or does it really not make a difference?
Really great question. And I remember you and I talked about that before, Moira, and I forgot to put it in the presentation. It is a thing. It is a literal thing because when you go tour colleges, you'll hear they love to brag like we have students from all 50 states, right? So that is a thing that they want. They want students from all 50 states. Um, you know, is there a dearth of students coming out of Massachusetts or Connecticut? No, not really, right? And some of us have heard them say like New Jersey is the greatest exporter of college students of any state, like any college you go to, there are a ton of kids from New Jersey for some reason. So I don't know that that's, if we lived in South Dakota or Alaska or something, our
Well,
chances
we've
might.
got people, we have people actually from all over the United
We have
States.
people from all
So
over, of
you and
course.
I are sitting in Massachusetts right now.
We're
Not everybody is. So
not
that's
too
just
far
something
from each
for
other.
folks to
So,
think a
I
little
mean,
bit
I
about.
think I wouldn't with a lot of stuff, I wouldn't bank on it,
Yeah.
but it's certainly not going to hurt. That's nice. But I wouldn't choose a college based on geographic diversity, right? Go where you want to be. That's much more important. But if you happen to live in a state that might be quite desirable, that might help some if you're strong too. Yeah.
Interviewing.
Hmm.
Do you need to interview? Does it matter if you interview? Do colleges care if you're interviewing?
Great question. So every college is different, which is the answer to a lot of questions. Some colleges just don't do interviews. And it's pretty easy to Google and go to their admissions page to see what their interview policy is. So some just say we don't do any interviews. A few require them. Most of them are optional. Many of them will set up alumni interviews in your area if the college is far away from you. Of course, Zoom interviews are possible. I would say if a student is not comfortable with talking to adults, if a student is really worried about the idea of interviewing and it's optional, then don't make yourself do it. It's not a huge piece of the decision from what I've seen. I think a lot of students go ahead and opt into it and opt to do it. Most interviews are not super scary, not super evaluative. They're kind of like, let's put a face with a name, let's get to know you. A lot of it is like meeting at Panera, at your local Panera or something for a coffee. And they're just going to say like, so how's your year going so far? How's senior year? How's your team going? How's your team doing? What production are you guys going to do this year? It's a lot of kind of just get to know you. They'll take some little notes. I usually tell students, just be yourself, smile. If the person makes a joke, laugh at it, help them out a little bit. But I don't think students need to be nervous. Sometimes I tell them like, there's no way for you to bomb this unless you just do something completely deplorable, which you're not going to do probably. So you go and you talk and you be yourself. I wouldn't get super stressed out about it. Some colleges, some of the highly selectives, after you submit, then they contact you and they set up an alumni interview with a local person. I'd say, most people try to do them. Don't worry about it if it's terrifying to you. It's just another piece of the puzzle. And I don't think it's as big of a piece as the transcript, the essays, the activities, the recommendation letters, things like that.
Well, Amy, we're at our time here. And
sorry, my answers are always very long.
No,
sorry.
That's great. I this is one of those topics, right, that you could go, you and anybody else could go on for a long time about. We're going to be meeting soon, actually, again. But we're going to be attacking this from a little bit different perspective because we're going to be talking about, I hate to even say it because I don't really even believe in it, really college planning for students who are in grades 9 and 10, which really isn't about college planning. It's really laying
exactly
right. It's laying the foundation for good high school years, which ultimately will lead to college. But we're going to be doing a talk together on that next week.
Yes.
Yeah. So we will see you again next Thursday night. And I want to thank everyone for coming. And we have recorded this session are going to send it out to everyone who signed up. And you saw, and you'll see on that Amy's contact information if you have additional questions for her, Macmillan Education. And Amy, I just want to thank you so much for enlightening us this evening. And I want to thank all of our families for coming. And I hope that this has helped lower the temperature and the stress level, at least a little bit, for everybody involved. Thank you, folks.
Thank you.